Good afternoon to everyone in Trinidad and Tobago. Good evening to those in Lagos, Nigeria, and welcome to the Black Consciousness Festival and the fourth of our 20 conversations for 2020. Thank you for joining us on our Zoom webinar or on Facebook Live. The festival provides a global online platform for the communication, commemoration, and sharing of vital histories and stories that boost the awareness and impact of the pride, power, and practice of people of African descent. The festival hopes to build awareness around how each of us can take the necessary steps for restitution and reparation. Your conversation lead this evening is Mr. Mike Okwoche, TV anchor. Welcome, Mike. Welcome, Bukola. Welcome, Dr. Ombongi.
Thank you very much, Sean. Thank you so much. And thank you to all our brothers and sisters in Trinidad and Tobago and every other part of the world, people who are joining in to this webinar. We really appreciate you. We thank you so much. Thank you. Welcome to the discussion on Africa. And this is where the heart of the world is one way or the other, directly or indirectly. And I'm happy and privileged to lead this discussion. I want to thank the Black Consciousness Festival this year for making it possible for us to be part of this discussion. We thank you for everything you've been doing. Thank you for continually putting this on the front burner. It's really amazing. And I thank my co-discussant, Dr. Ombongi from Nairobi, Kenya. Dr. Ombongi, I'm happy to have you join me right now. Welcome. All right, you have to unmute so we can hear you. Bukola Samuel-Wemimo, thank you very much for joining me as well. It's good to have you join me.
Yes, thank you very much, Mike. Good evening, everyone in Trinidad and Tobago. Good evening, Dr. Ombongi, and good evening to everyone online watching. It's a great privilege to be here. Some bit of newness scares me, but still, I'm looking forward to the conversation. So thank you very much.
Okay,
thank you
Doctor.
also, everybody. Thank you. I think I can have a chance to say hi to everybody. Thank you, Bukola. Thank you, Mike, and everybody else. It's also my pleasure to be here from Nairobi in Kenya, in this time, which I call the moment of the Black people.
That's the truth. That's the way to put it. Okay, let's go with the ground rules now. Just help us put off your mic. Mute your mics when you're not talking, and then when you are going to talk, you can unmute your mics, and then we roll. Right now, Dr. Ombongi, let me start with you. Now, there's so much talk about Africa. Africa is like the centerpiece of world's development, right from the days of slavery to the days of colonialism, and then even the days of military incursion and things like that. Africa has been on the news every single time. But somehow, people get, from outside of the continent, people have this conception or perception around Africa and about Africa and all of that. Or basically, let me start, how would you describe the continent of Africa? Dr. Ombongi.
Thank you, Mike, for your question. How do I describe the continent of Africa? The simple word I can use is Africa is the world. From the outset, Africa is actually the world. And the sense in which I say this is, if you look at historically, and if what the archaeologists tell us is true, which I believe is so, this is where humanity originated. Africa is the home of humanity. In that sense, then we believe that if humanity originated here, he radiated out to the rest of the world.
So it's the best place. You're talking about it's the best place of the world.
Everybody around the world is an African. That's the beginning point. But then it goes beyond that. the role of Africa in the world. You know, we talk about the Americas. It's a product of Africa in a sense. Our brothers and sisters who were driven in chains to the Americas, they built what we call America today. Those who were taken to Arab world, they build what we call the Arab world. You come fast forward to colonialism. Our resources were extracted from this continent and built the great British Empire that we talk about, which once Winston Churchill said the sun never sets in the British Empire. In a sense, that was a product of this continent. We were a colony of the British, and we contributed directly to making Europe develop. Walter Rodney talked about how Europe developed Africa. He forgot to talk about how Africa developed Europe.
Dr. Ombongi, I look forward to reading that book if I thought there was going to be that book, you know, how Africa overdeveloped Europe. While in school reading that book, actually, we used to make fun of it, as in like, we used to make some fun out of it, because the title is How Europe Underdeveloped Africa. And so we used to say, okay, how Africa overdeveloped Europe, you know, just as a way of, you know, passing by it. But however, let me bring Buki into the discussion now. I saw you shaking your head or nodding your head, you know, in all of that. Now, a lot of people feel that the days of slavery and the days of colonialism and the days of all of those negative things have long gone. So many decades after, that Africa is supposed to have taken up from where everything, the whites, or let's say Europe and America stopped and then moved on. But one way or the other, Africa is still not moving on the way it's supposed to be. Should we still blame what's happened in the days of slavery and colonialism, or should we blame ourselves for not rising up to the challenge today? You need to unmute yourself before you talk. Sorry, thank you.
That's an interesting question, Mike. We have no one to blame but ourselves. Africans must take responsibility for their destinies. You say that the days of colonialism are long gone, the days of slavery are long gone. Not at all, Mike. There's a
It seems your mic is it seems you're frozen somewhere. Dr. Ombongi, can you hear her?
Hello, can you hear me?
I can't hear her clearly. I am hearing her from the background, but it appears that there's a challenge with connectivity, perhaps. Probably she tries to adjust some things. We'll be able to hear her much more clearly.
All right. Buki, if you can hear us, maybe we have to get your network back on before you can join in again, because your video was frozen. We couldn't hear what you were saying. All right. We'll wait for Buki to come back on and then we get along. Now, Dr. Ombongi, the point there is, when it comes to discussing Africa, people, even Africans, have different perspectives to what is responsible for Africa not being in amongst the developed world right now. If you talk about some of the African countries that you can point to say, okay, they're ahead of others, maybe Africa, maybe Ghana, you know, Kenya, Nigeria, but they all have their challenges one way or the other. But why do we all still have different narratives when we all had almost the same experience?
Oh, well, thank you, Mike. You see, the different narratives are directly a product of the diversity of visions people have about what led us to where we are as a continent and as individual countries. But as I can see, caller is in now, but let me make this comment.
Yeah, Buki is back. We'll just let you finish before we go back to her.
Yes, you see, when we look at the continent generally, for the last almost 500 years, Africa has generally been a place which the world fights for and fights over. And I'm now speaking as a historian. Africa has been a place of war. If people are not fighting over it, they are fighting for it. You know, from slavery to colonialism, from colonialism to what we call neo-colonialism. The fight has been over Africa. If it is not the West fighting over Africa, it's the East fighting over Africa. The African countries are only half a century old, 50 years generally, from the time Ghana won its independence to the time when the last country to be liberated. I think the most recent was Zimbabwe in 1980 to throw off the chains of colonialism.
And then we had Eritrea, and then we now had South Sudan.
South Sudan. Their story is slightly different. Yeah, but in real terms, colonialism begins to end when Zimbabwe is liberated from the British and Mozambique a few years before that. So fundamentally, what happens in the continent is a product of its history. What we haven't done, and this is where I agree with what Bukola started saying, is to look at our history, internalize it, and understand it in ways that can help us move forward. Mike, we have not moved. We are still steeped in our history without realizing that we cannot be what we want to be if we are stuck in our heritage. History is our heritage. The future is to come. The now is the issue. So the fundamental question is that be it Nigeria, be it Kenya, be it South Africa, if we interpret our past in ways that does not make us move forward, in ways that shows that we are not slaves of our history, then that is where the problem is. We have not gotten what I call the yes we can moment, which Obama planted in the United States a few years back, because that is where our challenge is in our leaders. That is why we keep blaming colonialism, we keep blaming slavery, we keep blaming this and that, except ourselves.
Okay.
Let me finish this, Mike.
Yes. Okay.
What you become, even as an individual, is determined conceptually by how you interpret your past. If you do it in such a way that does not make you go, then you will remain stuck in that timeline of the past.
Word, I must say word there, strong word there. Now, Bukola, it's good to have you back. Now, the point there is you were talking about new colonialism earlier on. We remember Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana talked about the issues of new colonialism in those days. But the point there is, when you talk about new colonialism, it seems like you're pointing fingers or drawing attention to external forces from outside of Africa being responsible for what Africa is. Is that what it is?
I think it's a joint problem. External forces responsible that we have given room to thrive, so to speak. That's the point I was trying to make. When our leaders go cap in hand, as I say, begging for loans and not taking cognizance of what Dr. Ombongi said is the yes we can room that is at home, the world of possibilities that is back home. You know, for instance, during the NSAS protest here in Nigeria, someone was talking about what we could have made in 1 year from the Lekki toll gate where the shooting happened, which is 2% of the budget. And look at, you know, what had been made from that Lekki toll gate all year round in 4 years. Imagine what that kind of fund would have achieved in Africa. So neocolonialism is continuing, but our leaders are also encouraging it. So that's why our youth will take off to Canada. They'll take off endangering their lives through the Mediterranean, you know, just to get to Italy and wash dead bodies or flip burgers, you know, or do types demeaning jobs that do not liberate. So as Bob Marley said, Africans must emancipate themselves from mental slavery. Our leaders travel outside the country and they see the world of possibilities, but they come back home and they're not able to translate this into development. What else can that be if not a type of jinxing the continent?
All right. Thank you, Buki. Yeah, thank you, Buki, for bringing us up to understanding this aspect of things. Now, Dr. Ombongi, the point is, when you talk about Africa, you were saying that Africa is the birthplace of the world. Can you draw some of our attention to some of the unique things that Africa has that is remaining the bride of the world? The West, every from the East, you know, now China is all over the place on the African continent, and it seems like they've not exhausted everything that Africa has yet. Africa is still the destination everyone wants to go to when it comes to India, when it comes to China, when it comes to Russia, when it comes to Europe and America and all of that. Can you talk to us, what are these special things? Why is Africa so much of a great bride for the world?
Thank you, Mike. You see, I said Africa is really the center of the world. Over history, you know, the whole last millennium, the history of the world is replete with the fight over Africa from others. That fight continues. Africa has had the ability to attract suitors from different parts of the universe. And what is it here? Of course, you begin with resources. Africa has perhaps the most disproportionate deposits of every mineral that you want to think about compared to other continents of the world. It was once gold. It came to diamond. It was once copper in gold in South Africa, copper in Zambia, you know, uranium in the Democratic Republic of Congo. I can go on, and we are talking about what everybody conceives as a virgin continent with all the resources that you can think of, from land to forests, from forests to many other resources that you can think of. That is the first thing that makes Africa the most attractive continent that you can think of. That is the reason why very few in the world will want to accept the idea that we will stand up one day, put our act together and say enough is enough. We want to use African resources to develop Africa. Everybody from east to west, south to north, is working very hard for that not to happen. And the leader who is going to get Africa out of this will have to appreciate that when the informal European empire and the former European empire ended in Africa, it was based on the extraction of African resources. The informal empire started, and that is what operates here. The second one, which you know, everybody knows, that of all the continents, this is the one that has the most youthful population. A greater part of this continent has the most youthful, energetic population that you can think of. Much more easier, barring the conflicts that they talk about, barring the bad things that the world media is full of about the continent. It's much more easier, perhaps, to do business here than you can find elsewhere. I'm talking.
You get all the labor you want here in Africa.
Yeah, a little bit of experience. I have lived in Europe, I've lived in the United States, I've spent some time in Asia, in India, and I say that that possibilities in my own country, Kenya, is endless. You know, that's why a few years back, after finishing my PhD from the University of Cambridge, and I packed my bags to come home, many of my brothers and sisters thought that I had gone bonkers. But in this country, I have managed to do a few things which the people I left in Europe I have not done. So to answer your question more precisely, we have resources here that you cannot find anywhere else. And that is what is attracting everybody to Africa. And I mean, they are our friends, but first and foremost, they are looking at not what we are, but what we have.
What we have, what we have, exactly. Now, Bukola, the point is, you have traveled also to many countries of the world. You've been to Dubai, to the Middle East, you've been to Europe, you've seen all of those, you've been to other countries of Africa, as the case may be. But when it comes to outside of the African continent, where people talk about the African narrative from outside of Africa, what do you hear them say about Africa? And how do you feel when you hear them say whatever they say about Africa?
I must be honest with you. The narrative is a very sad one. I recall on one of my visits to Dubai, as you mentioned, it was actually a trip back to the country. And I was going through immigration, and I was asked to, you know, after my passport had been checked, and it was seen that I was Nigerian because I was carrying the green passport. Just recently, you know, amid the US election, CNN, I don't think it was a CNN anchor, it was an analyst that was talking about the process, and she was saying that it must be seen to be not Nigerian. So the allusion to Nigerian there is anything substandard, anything less than credible. So that's for Nigeria. But for Africa in general, I don't think it's that bad, but it's not encouraging all the same. It's a continent that ought to have taken off from its past. It's a continent that ought to have broken away from, you know, the sad narrative of its history. Dr. Ombongi was saying that they're looking at what we have and not what we are. But is Africa looking at what she is? Is Africa looking at who she is? When is Africa going to embrace her identity fully to the extent that its youth will one day rise from slavery, from its past, where it's unable to develop its potential to the full? So the narrative that we hear of Africa, it's not the best. Many don't know the huge human and natural resources that we have outside the country, but they've resigned to the narrative that Africa is a country of people who live below the poverty line, of women and children who are suffering from kwashiorkor, from disease, from starvation, from all of that. It was Dr. Lumumba that I was listening to yesterday who said that the lion who does not have a historian will end up not having his story told, but the hunter will tell a sad story or what is not representative of the story of the hunter. That is the sad reality of Africa. So we must tell the story. And if we're going to tell the story, we must begin to tap our resources to full potential. We must begin to utilize our resources to full potential.
Okay. Now, it's good to know, it's good to really understand. Now, Dr. Ombongi, the one is, I remember Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, former head of the AU chairperson, when they were launching the Africa Agenda 2063, was talking about the potential of Africa, was saying that the solution to African problems lie within the African continent and not anywhere else in the world. But the point is, we also have the narrative of globalization, where no country or continent is an island of its own. You certainly have to develop in relationship to other countries as the world is now interwoven. Does Africa really have the potential? Because you talked about all the resources we have, both human, natural resources of all kinds. Does Africa have what it takes really by itself to decide on how to say, yes, we can by ourselves?
On the surface, when you look at generally, Africa has what it takes to be what it was meant to be, a great continent made up of great people. The challenge, the greatest challenge has been, and this is how I see it, is that have we realized that potential as a continent, both conceptually and practically? If you look at it generally, Mike, colonialism was all about the denial of the ability of Africans to organize themselves into sovereignties that one can think about. I'm describing it like one British historian indicated that some time back. That is very true. The question will be, how many of our leaders, how many of our young people, how many of those of us who are in the front line have realized that and gone back to the drawing board and reshaped the narrative that we have inherited that Bukola was talking about, of a continent, of a continent facing extinction, of a continent that doesn't have a history beyond what the Europeans did. The potential we have, but what creates civilizations is not the potential alone. It goes beyond that. The readiness and the preparedness of our people to seize the moment, the African moment, and put this continent, put our different countries in a trajectory that will take us forward. And where I see that potential is a dream that the Pan-Africanists of the 1960s, led by Nkrumah, had, a united Africa. As you realize that the world will never be happy with a united Africa, is because they know the potential that holds. And our leaders have the readiness to sacrifice the little, retrogressive national consciousness and put this continent together and come up with this ideal United States of Africa that can negotiate at the international level for the benefit of the continent. That is where the $1 million question lies. But if we continue to be divided, if we continue to fight among ourselves, then our ability to move forward and to develop and to be what we were meant to be, a great continent, will remain at the level of potentiality.
Well, it's really spot on there, I must say. Buki, the point there is, when it comes to this translating from potential to prosperity, to practical and actual prosperity, that is where the issue is lacking. And as it is right now, a lot of people are asking this question: Africa, are we originally meant to have democracies the way the West have it? Because the narrative right now is you have democracies where your leaders have to go after 4 years or 5 years or 7 years, depending on how you put it, or something. Before the colonialism or before the coming of the white men, Europeans or whatever it is, as you put it, as it's called back locally, Africa had this kingship, ethnic groups ruled by kingship. Everyone has, every ethnic group has a king one way or the other. Is that the rulership or the leadership kind that Africa is lacking now that is responsible for something? Because the democratic system we have now is a borrowed Western system of democracy where it doesn't seem to work. What do you think? You have to mute your mic.
Sorry, I'm getting used to this. The same way Africa is not tapping her resources to full potential is the same way she's not tapping her intellectual resources to full potential. It is said it was when we had the Eastern region, the Western region, the Northern region, when the late nationalists used the resources from cocoa to develop education in the West. And today, Nigeria, the Southwest, is the most advanced educationally. Take, for instance, how many years ago, in 2001, we had the Abuja Declaration, during which governments, African governments, committed to spending 15% of their budget to health. How many countries have committed to that? In fact, we have had countries reduce the amount of spending that they commit to the health sector. So these are some of the things that we should begin to look at in terms of translating our potential into results, economically, politically, for the collective interest, national interest, and indeed continental interest of Africa. We must review Kenya. Some years back, there was a kind of devolution of powers. And since then, I believe that Kenya has had a bit more progress economically. The same restructuring song is being sung now in Nigeria about a need, an urgent need, a dire need to review the type of government that we're practicing to see whether it is indeed profiting Nigeria as a whole. Is it in national interest for us to continue to practice this kind of democracy, this kind of pseudo-federalism that throughout the country is agreed to be too expensive, such that the average Nigerian, the Nigerian youth, which is, dominating, which seems to be a bigger part of the population, is not getting the benefit of this type of government structure that the country is practicing. So I believe that the democracy that is being practiced in most African countries is not profiting a lot of the people in Africa, and that's why we're having uprising, whether it's in Togo, whether it's in Gambia, whether it's in the Democratic Republic of Congo, there seems to be uprising each, and every season. So I'm convinced that we need to review it.
All right. Thank you very much, Buki. There are some questions coming in from people who are viewing and watching online on Facebook and different platforms. So we will incorporate the questions one way or the other. Dr. Ombongi, we have heard so many times where people call the African Union, they've called it the toothless bulldog sometimes, because the organization was created one way or the other to actually galvanize the issue of Africa or the interests of Africa and put it together for the prosperity of Africa. But the point there is, Africa still, after the creation of Organization of African Unity and then translated to African Union, Africans are still not seeing the benefit of an organization or continent-wide organization like that. So this question is saying, what is the role of the Organization of African Union, or African Union as it is called right now, when it comes to emancipating Africa to the dream of an average African?
Oh, well, a good question, Mike. That question was, I was asked that question by one of my students a few weeks back about the role of the African Union in emancipating the continent. You see, I see that if there is a soul that is very uncomfortable in its grave now, whatever it is, it's the soul of the founders of the African Union, particularly the great Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana. A man, a Pan-Africanist who had a dream of uniting this continent. The main thing here is, or the missing dimension, if you looked at critically, is, you see, the African Union is a great institution. But within it, and for the operation that it has had over the years, it appears that there is some missing dimension that needs to be discussed and agreed upon, as far as the role it is playing to bring the continent together and create an agenda that will move us in the direction that will have the ability to transform and change the continent. That can only happen that if within the institution there is a common agreement that however much we try to be friends of the world, we need to sort out our problems internally first and engage with the rest of the world as equal. We now don't in a number of aspects. And there is a way in which, and there's room in which the AU can bring that to the center of its agenda without necessarily playing it out to the world. What I'm saying, in a word, are we able to create an institution that will have African first, African second, and African final before we interface with the rest of the world? We are, for example, in the second round of Scramble for Africa. This time round is not among the European powers, and we don't foresee a second Berlin conference like the one of 1894-95. What we see is the struggle for Africa to control Africa within the forces from the West and the East. How do we have this conversation of how we interface with these informal arrangements that seem to, one more time again, come so strongly to Africa without the continent having a voice to design our agenda and to follow that agenda through and to enable us interface and engage with the world as equals, not as subordinates.
Yeah, but Dr. Ombongi,
And I
but
will
Dr.
finish
Ombongi,
this. Let me finish this.
okay.
Yeah, let me finish this. Sometime in the late, and I hope I'm correct on this in terms of the dates, in the late 1950s, early 1960s, a journalist asked Kwame Nkrumah, and that was at the height of the Cold War, the direction that Africa was taking, whether Africa was going east or west. Nkrumah answered that question by saying, we are neither going east nor west, we are going forward. Are we able to truly tell the world that we are not going east nor west, but we are going forward and engage everybody around us as equal? At the moment, we are not. We are subordinate to the powers of the world. We are subordinate to those who come to our doors. That's why we easily accept their loans, we easily accept their conditionalities, we easily accept many other things. When is the day we can stand up and say, in our poverty, in our civil strife, in our problems, we are a people, we will stop this and we want to go forward.
Okay. All right. Now, it's a great question, and it's a question that is going to bog on people's minds as we get along. Now, Buki, the point there is taking it from where Dr. Ombongi stopped there. A lot of persons, some analysts have said that when you consider the history, like he was mentioning the founding fathers of the African continent, when you mentioned Kwame Nkrumah, Jomo Kenyatta, Julius Nyerere, you know, all of those big names on the African continent. Now, Thabo Mbeki and the others, and all of that. Now, but the point there is, as this right now, sorry, Oliver Tambo, not Thabo Mbeki. Thabo Mbeki is still one of the new Oliver Tambo, and I was referring to Oliver Tambo in South Africa. Now, the point there is, Nelson Mandela was seen as the last, strongest, influential world or continental leader the African continent had. Outside and after Nelson Mandela, it doesn't seem like Africa has that figure that can galvanize the whole of the continent together, where they're going to sit down and listen to this leader and say, where should we go? You know, that subtle influence to put everybody together to say, okay, let us work together. It seems Africa doesn't have that leadership right now after Nelson Mandela. So where do we go from here if we have to try to find solutions? Because we're trying to round off one way or the other, but where do we, from your mind, where do we go from here?
Mike, we have exemplary leaders in Africa. We just need to look inwards. I mean, the beautiful ones are not yet born. There is great leadership potential within us. But Africa is giving birth to children and disowning her children. Look at the problem of capital flight. Look at, for instance, the United States of America. A huge percentage of doctors, practicing doctors who are excelling, brilliant surgeons who are excelling in the United States of America are Nigerians. If you go to Dubai, you see a huge number of Kenyans, a huge number of Ugandans, brilliant people who are economy driving. So we must sending off her children to the West to continue to develop the West. It's a continuation of the neocolonialism that we talk about. If Nigeria, back home in Africa rather, you know, we must continue to look at the big picture, the continental picture. The youths will stay, and then the leadership potential will blossom, will unveil, and then Africa can evolve, can come alive. If you took the Naira out of Africa today, out of the continent today, you cannot spend it. The same way if you take any other currency out of Africa today, you cannot spend it. The unequal competition must stop. But if you went outside the world, you have the euro, you have the dollar. These are some of the things that we need to look at. We need to take a second look at. So if we do not solve these problems, if we do not retrogression, if we do not look beyond the need to compete individually, we cannot rise above our challenges. But first of all, we must realize that we have to solve our individual national challenges first before we think continentally.
All right. That's really spot on there. Now, the point is, Dr. Ombongi, as we're gradually winding down, there were some intellectuals on the African continent were pushing for the expansion of the African Union to cover the African brothers in the Caribbean, Trinidad and Tobago, Jamaica, Haiti, Bahamas, even Brazil, and all of that who have traced their origins and descent to the African continent, so that they can be this engagement and interface, so that they become part of what is going on the African continent, and Africa also become part of what is going on there too. How will that also help in consolidating the move forward, on the way forward?
You see, Mike, I quite agree with the school of thought that the entity we call Africa is much more conceptual than just geographical. The African is an individual who has left imprints of his influence virtually in every corner of the world. The African built the Americas. The African built the Europe that we have today. The influence of the African can be felt as far afield as India, much of the Arab world. That is what we need to tap into. We are brothers and sisters, whether you are in the Caribbean, whether you are in Saudi Arabia, whether you are in the far China, we are one. We are African, people of the Negroid race. The moment we realize that consciousness in our individual countries and come together and say we are working for Africa. Bukola has just talked about the Nigerian, the Kenyan, the Ugandan intellectuals working in the United States. And the same of the men and the women of African origin that are working in Britain, that are working in many European countries. If we tapped into those networks, if every Nigerian who lives in every corner in the world got interested with what is happening in Nigeria, what is happening in Kenya, our countries will never be the same again. You need to begin to think. One thing that makes me admire sometimes the approach that Indians give. They talk about non-resident Indians. Everybody of Indian origin, whether he has been to India or lived in India or not, is still an Indian. And they call them non-resident Indians. And we have non-resident Africans who are interested in what is happening in the continent, because what happens here directly affects our brothers in the United States. When people see them and we are fighting in the streets of Nairobi, nobody will know that this is a Kenyan, this is a Nigerian, these are Africans, and they have come here because they cannot agree among themselves back in Nairobi, back in Abuja, back in Dakar, back in Johannesburg. So we are all Africans. We are one people. Let the African Union be about the conceptualization of the African beyond the geographic boundaries of the continent and our countries.
Spot on, I must say, Dr. Ombongi. Thank you so much. Now, Bukola, you were talking about youth restiveness in your country, Nigeria, earlier on, when you talked about the End SARS protests in the country. Now, let me direct this question to the issue, to talk about the issue of the youth, what role they played or what role they have to play. Dr. Ombongi said the continent of Africa, from statistics, have the largest population of young people in the world. When you compare the data and statistics, what role can the youth play in turning around what we are talking about?
A huge role. The youths have a big responsibility, and I'm glad you have raised this, because the youth rose to the occasion in Nigeria in the month of October. It was a momentous time in the history of this country, and it was coincidentally, it was happening in the month of independence, when youths that had been dismissed as not interested in issues that had to do with the future, their collective future, as the leaders of tomorrow, as we usually say, took an unprecedented interest and began to articulate the issues of development, the issues of unemployment, the issues of bad governance. I mean, NSAS started as a movement against police brutality, the excesses of men of the Nigeria police force, but then it transformed into a movement against all forms of oppression in the country. It couldn't have happened without the Nigerian youth that filled that space, that filled that vacuum that had been there for so long, a gaping hole where Nigerian youth was missing in action to articulate their voice to demand what belongs to them. Education, good education, employment, good jobs. And it happened at the time when, you know, the country was also an unending strike. So the youths who were at home, you know, the universities were on strike, the youths who were at home took up the challenge and began to protest. So the youths, if the youths could have done this, it showed that they can also, you know, take up leadership positions. They can also fill the vacuum in politics. They can contest for offices. Then they can articulate the needs, better articulate the needs of the Nigerian people in parliament, better articulate the needs of the Nigerian people in the executive. So the youths, if the youths of Nigeria could have done this, imagine what the youths of the African continent can do. The movement started on the social media. It moved to the streets, but such momentum, it gained traction that even in Uganda's movement, and said that they were going to use this as an opportunity to also protest police brutality in Uganda. So imagine if the African youths rose to the occasion in the same manner that the Nigerian youths spoke up in this month of October. But then again, use it to condemn all forms of social ills on the African continent. And then, you know, gain a color, come to their full potential. Let them get to know themselves, you know. It's a form of self-discovery for the Nigerian youth. And by extension, if it's a possibility in Nigeria, it can be a possibility as well on the African continent. The youths can take up leadership and show example to the older generation that we've been waiting for so long to articulate the views, to fully represent the continent. I hope I was able to communicate the ideas.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much, Buki. I had to change my my connectivity as I was having issues earlier on. But however, we have to round off now. We must thank you, Bukola Samuel-Wemimo, for the time you've spent and all of the issues that you have raised. We must thank you. And Dr. Ombongi, you want to say something before we round off in 1 minute?
Yes, let me weigh in what Bukola is saying about the youth of Africa, which I consider to be an important component of what one could describe as Black consciousness. Mike, I was told from the time I was in nursery school that I'm the leader of tomorrow. When I got to secondary school, they still told me, you are the leader of tomorrow. When I got to high school, I was told the same story. In university, I was told the same story. When I was a postgraduate student, I was told the same story. I have discovered now that you cannot be a leader of tomorrow if you don't begin to be a leader today. That is why I will urge the youth of Africa that begin to be leaders today and interrogate the situations that we live in and demand what is rightly ours. Our country doesn't belong to those of us who are adults now. We have borrowed them from our posterity. So the youth must demand that let Africa be what it was meant to be. Tomorrow will be too late.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Ombongi, Kenneth Ombongi of the University of Nairobi. We appreciate you and the time you spent. Thank you for your insights. Thank you for all of your contribution to this. We really appreciate you. Bukola Samuel-Wemimo, international broadcast journalist. Thank you very much for your time on the program. And we thank you for your contribution and your insight as well. We thank you. Thank you both. All right. This is where we come to the end of the discussion on Africa, the state of Africa on the Black Consciousness Festival this year for 2020. We must thank the organizers. Thank you for the privilege. Thank you for the opportunity to share our minds and issues on the African continent. We thank you all for that contribution and the platform given to us to talk. This is where I sign off now. I am Mike Okwoche, and let me hand back over to Sean. Sean.
Thank you so much, Mike. Thank you, Dr. Ombongi and Bukola. This conversation was absolutely amazing. As somebody of African descent on the other side of the Atlantic, I learned so many things today and heard so many valuable insights that I think will change the way we see ourselves and the way we see the African continent going forward. So thank you again for your time and your contribution.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
For all who've been watching, thank you for joining us. Make sure to tell a friend, a colleague, or a family member about the festival, about our 20 conversations and 20 cultural activities all through the month of November. Coming up tomorrow, we have another conversation entitled Being Black in the Beauty Industry, being led by Janelle Penny-Comisiong, a native of Trinidad and Tobago, who was the first Black woman to win Miss Universe, that competition. She will be talking with Cheryl Neal, an African-American who was the first African-American to participate in Ilaia's Night of Black Beauty competition in Salvador, Bahia, Brazil. And they will also be engaging with a gentleman called Mr. Elder Diaz, who is the owner and founder of the HTA agency in Sao Paulo, the only agency in Brazil that specializes in Black models. So don't miss that conversation tomorrow at 7 p.m. AST. Later on this evening, for those who are interested, at 4 p.m. we have a Kenyan food demonstration, Dr. Ombongi, actually a chef here in Trinidad who's doing Kenyan food. And at 7 p.m. our time in Trinidad, we have DJs in the dance playing a variety of music from 60s and 70s music to rapso and calypso and kaiso. So thank you all for joining. Tune in, and if you need any more information about the festival, you can find it at www.theblackconsciousnessfestival.com. Thanks again.